In the previous episode, we compared mailables to notifications. So now that you understand the difference, let's keep toying around. Here's that payment received notification we built. And if we scroll down, it's only being sent on the mail channel. Let's add another one. If I switch to Firefox, here's the documentation for notifications. So yes, we can send it as email, we can store it in the database, we can broadcast it, we can send a text message, we can use Slack, and there's even a whole community of third-party channels you can reach for. To start though, let's review database notifications. So this means when something takes place in your system that should generate a notification for the user. Yes, one option is to email them. Another option is to store it in a database and then display it to them when they return to your website. Just think of something like the Facebook notification alarm icon. Same idea. All right, so if we're going to use database notifications, we need to create a table to store it and then migrate it. Okay, so let's copy that. We'll switch to the terminal and I'll paste that in. All right, so it creates the migration and then runs it. So if I switch to Table Plus, here's that new notifications table. And if we take a look at the structure, we store the type, we have some polymorphic keys, the data, and then some timestamps. And of course, if you ever want to look at that migration, look for the Create Notifications table. And here is exactly what it looks like. So our primary key is a universal unique ID, which is basically a random unique ID. The type, the polymorphic keys, a column for the data itself, which will be JSON, and then a timestamp to record when the user read the notification. All right, so we're all set to go. Let's return to that payments controller. Here is where we send a notification, but now I'm going to store it in the database, but also send it as an email. So you can select one or many channels. How cool is that? All right, let's give it a shot. Once again, we will make the payment. That will trigger a notification. And if I switch to Mailtrap, sure enough, we have that notification. However, if we switch to Table Plus and look at the data, give it a refresh, now we also store the notification in the database. So have a look here. The type will be basically the class path. What kind of notification do we have? The polymorphic notifiable section is the thing that we are notifying. So almost always it will be a user, but it doesn't have to be. And then finally, notice the JSON data is empty here. All right, let's take a look at that. If we switch back to the notification, yes, we've translated it for an email, but notice toArray, which the database will use, it's returning an empty array. So let's populate it. Now, if I scroll up though, in this case, we don't have any specifics because it's only an example. But yeah, let's say when we notify the user that a payment was received, you might have a payment object or something like that. In our case, I'm just going to hardcode incense how much was received. But yeah, in real life, that might be an object or something stored in the database or even a response to a webhook from Stripe or something like that. Okay, so now in our notification, we will accept the amount. I will initialize it. And if we scroll down here, now I can say the amount would be this amount. But yeah, in other cases, you might have a model, in which case you can just cast the model to an array or something like that. It just depends. Anyways, if we give this a shot now, one more time, and I switch back to Table Plus and give it a refresh, now you can see we've stored that a payment was received by this user, and here is the relevant data. In this case, the amount received was 900 cents or $9. All right, so now let's present this information to the user. So like I said, often you'll have some kind of alarm bell up here, and you click it, and using JavaScript, it'll show a little overlay. We don't have anything for this demo, so why don't we set up a new endpoint to view your notifications? We'll do it really quick. In my routes file, we'll say, if you make a GET request to notifications, that will load a, how about user notifications controller and a show method. And yes, you must be signed in. Okay. PHP Artisan make controller, user notifications controller. Let's open that. We have a method show that's going to return a view, and we'll just say notifications.show. And then finally, in the sidebar, let's go to resources, views, and add that file now. Notifications directory and a view called show.blade.php. Finally, I'm just going to steal a little bit of this boilerplate here. Okay, so at this point, we want to show all notifications for the user. Let's try it out. So I will visit notifications, all right, and we have our section. So how do we query the database? Well, it's really easy. You'll remember in the last episode, every default user uses this trait. And if we have a look at this, all right, we have a relationship here called notifications. We could even fetch the notifications that have been read. And you'll see here, it's still deferring to this original relationship. It's just adding a where clause. Give me only the notifications where the read at or read at column is not null. And if it's not null, that means they have read it. Okay, and then finally, you can do the inverse. So with that in mind, have a look at this. It looks like these are related to a user with an ID of 2. So very quickly, if I boot up PHP Artisan Tinker and I find the user, all right, let's get their notifications. And it's as simple as that. They have 2 notifications. Now you'll notice that each item here is an instance of database notification. And if you take a look at that model, if I scroll down, we have a few things here. First, we can mark a notification as read or unread. We can check, has it been read, and do the inverse. But if I scroll up, we also have a method here called notifiable. Get the notifiable entity that the notification belongs to. So again, that sounds confusing. In most cases, it's just saying get the user who is notifiable. But again, it doesn't have to be the user, even though it usually is. So for example, we have our collection here, right? Let's grab the very first one, all right? And then let's get notifiable. This is going to give me the user who was notified about this notification. So I think we have everything we need here. Let's return to user notifications table. We can fetch them. We'll do it inline here. So their notifications are auth or request user, give me notifications, or again, I could say give me the unread notifications. For now, let's grab everything. Okay, finally, we'll go to our view and display them. And a simple list will be fine. For each notifications as notification, then within a list item, spit out the notification type, at least to start. All right, so if we switch back, give it a refresh, here are the 2 notifications. Now, granted, in this case, a class path isn't overly informative, but of course you can inspect the type and then provide an appropriate description. For example, let's say if the notification type is, and we'll grab that, then we have received a payment from you. Come back to Firefox, refresh, and there you go. But what about the specifics? Well, we have that stored here, right? Let's get rid of that one. Now we just have 1. That includes the amount. So let's grab that. We have received a payment of, and we have our notification. Now, if I want to grab an item here, once again, let's go back to database notifications. And if I scroll up, you'll see, where is it? Right here. So we are casting that data column to an array, which means when I access notification data, all of these will be available as keys of an array. Okay, so let's come back and we'll say notification data amount. And there we go. And yeah, of course, you can set up an accessor to format that. You could have a method called in dollars. I'm just going to do it inline here. Very, very quick, but you get the idea. So let's process another payment. Here's that form again. We will send a fictional $9. And if I switch back, of course, we have another notification as well as an email. So a single notification on 2 different channels. So the only remaining step is to mark these as read. Now, we could do this in a few ways, but to keep it simple, in this case, if you load the page, we're going to assume you've now read the notification. So let's do this. We'll go back to user notifications controller. And what I'll do here, let's extract the variable like so. And well, you could do either one, but in this case, we'll say we only want the unread notifications. But yeah, in other situations, even if you've read it, you still want to access it. So those are things you need to think about. But yeah, in this case, we're only grabbing the unread notifications. So once we grab them and we display a view, again, we're going to assume now they've been read. So I'll show you the slow way that I wouldn't recommend. You could say for each notification, loop over them and then say notification mark as read. You could do that, However, potentially that's a lot of database queries and you end up with the n+1. So instead, when you fetch the collection here, you're actually getting a custom collection. It'll be database, notifications collection. And you'll see it extends the normal collection, but it stacks on additional methods to mark as read and unread. So that means I could instead say notifications mark as read. So think about it. The first visit, we will fetch any unread notifications, but immediately after it, we will update them in the database. So on the next page load, when we fetch the unread notifications, it won't show anything in this case until a new notification comes in. All right, let's give it a shot. So we'll give it a refresh. These are the two unread notifications. However, if I switch back and give it a refresh, notice that we've now marked them as read, which means the next time we reload, we don't see anything. And of course, you would want to display feedback in that case. Let's switch this to for else. You have no unread notifications at this time. Okay, so come back, give it a refresh, and there you go. So let's finish up one last time. Let's make a new payment. We send the email, we update the database, we give it a refresh, we see the notification, it's marked as read, so on the next page refresh, we don't see anything. Or by the way, you could even split these into two different sections. The unread notifications at the top and the read ones in a more muted color at the bottom. So that's basically it, but I will wrap up by showing you a quick little tip here, if you like. In this case, we extracted a variable because we needed to call a method on it, but we still wanted to pass that original variable to the view. So in these cases, Laravel has a useful thing we call higher order tap. Sounds a little fancy, it's really not. But have a look at this. If I were to say, well, ultimately, I want the user's unread notifications, but I also want to return a method on it that returns void and doesn't return anything, here's how we could handle that. If you want to be a little fancier, this would work as well. Have a look. Make a new payment, switch back, you still get the same thing as before. So basically what happens here is when you call the tap function, it accepts this value, and ultimately that is what will be returned from the tap function, as you see there. But you also have the ability to call additional methods on that object while still returning the original object. So yeah, this is very useful in situations where you have a variable, you want to call a method on it, but that method returns void. So in those situations, you end up with this pattern like this. Create a variable, call a method on it, return the variable, right? So in those cases, you can switch over to tap. Just know whatever you pass to tap is what is being returned from the function. That's how I think of it. Or if this is a little long, you can still extract a variable called, how about notifications? Yeah, but it just makes it a little bit cleaner. Anyways, a small little tip there. In the next episode, we'll review a different notification channel.